Have you ever wondered how commercial property or residential property that can have income generated by different tenants can be valuated? Well, in today's video, we're going to cover the income approach to valuation. So the income approach to valuation is the main tool used to evaluate the value of a certain property based on the level of income it could generate. So what are we talking about here? Well, the first thing that we have to keep in mind is the concept of net operating income, or the NOI. And the net operating income, if we simplify it, is essentially thinking about how much money this property can generate, can pull in, versus how much money you have to spend to take care of this property, different taxes, different amounts of money. And at the end of the year, the amount of money that's coming in minus the amount of money that's leaving, what's left? Well, that is, in a very simplified manner, your net operating income. And you use that information there, and then you have to use the capitalization rate to determine the value of this property. So it's going to be net operating income divided by the capitalization rate. That will equal what the value of this property should be. In the past, when I had students present this in class, they made the mistake of using a property. They would have the value that it's selling for, the net operating income. They would simplify it to find the capitalization rate. Then they would use this capitalization rate, and then they would divide net operating income by this capitalization rate. And based on small rounding errors, they would get a value very close to the initial value that they started with. And that's wrong, because you're just finding some information based on value and net operating income, and you're using that same information to then calculate what the actual value should be for this property. So how do we determine the capitalization rate? Well, let's just understand what the capitalization rate determines, or what it means. So if I think of a property that is selling for $1 million, and I'm looking at how much money is coming in. Well, if I have $100,000 coming in, well, that would mean that I have a capitalization rate of 10%. So let's just understand what we mean here by a capitalization rate. So if we were to rework that formula that we have, and we were to switch places the capitalization rate with the value of the home, we would get net operating income over the value is equal to the capitalization rate. So what does that mean? Well, let's say I have a property that's worth $1 million, and I have $100,000 of net operating income. That means that I have 100,000 over $1 million. That is 10% capitalization rate, or 0.1 is 10% capitalization rate. So what that means is that's my rate of return. It's the same idea as I'm putting $1 million in a stock or any other financial instrument, and every year out of that $1 million I put down, I'm getting $100,000 worth of dividends. I'm getting 10% of that back to me. That's, in a certain way, this capitalization rate is a rate of return. The greater the capitalization rate, the greater your rate of return is. Does that mean that the best properties have the highest capitalization rates? Not necessarily. It's the same idea as when we think of the stock market. If you have a very safe financial instrument, the rate of return you should expect on that financial instrument is going to be much lower than if you were to have a very risky financial instrument. So if you're in a market that is seen as very safe in terms of price of the property fluctuating, doesn't really go down, it's just always going up, well, in those areas, you would expect very small capitalization rate. If we look at the example that we have here in Vancouver, we could see in different municipalities, we had capitalization rates varying between 3 and 4%, 2.5 to 3%, 4 and 4.5%, 4.25 to 4.75. So anywhere in that 2.5 to 5% range. But if you were to buy in an area that's much more risky, if you're going to buy a property in a foreign country and there's much more risk involved, well, probably you would want more return than that based on that risk. So what we expect from these properties based on this capitalization rate of, let's say, 3% is for $1 million property, you're only making 3% of that in income generated as net operating income. So this is after all your expenses are paid. So your net operating income for those properties of $1 million is about $30,000 a year, much less than the example I gave of 10%, which was $100,000 a year. So the capitalization rate is dependent on the industry and location that you're in. It's dependent on the risk and everything else, all those factors that you're dealing with. So first off, yes, you can find the capitalization rate, but you don't find it based on the selling price or the asking price and the net operating income of the specific property you're interested in. You actually should look at all properties in that same kind of area that have the similar attributes. So a little bit like the comparison approach, look at all those properties, how much they're selling for, what is their net operating income, calculate all those capitalization rates, and then you could determine what is a proper range of capitalization rates for the property that you're interested in. And based on that, and based on the net operating income that should often be given to you, you could calculate what's a fair market value for this specific property. So at the end of the day, in industries or in areas where things are safer and where values of the houses typically go up, you could expect lower capitalization rates. In areas where properties are really stagnant in prices, they don't really change much, you would expect higher capitalization rates than in areas where you expect property prices to go up over the time as they've done in the past, such as Vancouver and other areas of that nature. And then if you're going to take on more risk, well, what is the capitalization rate that you require? So as I'm shopping around for a property in Costa Rica, well, my capitalization rate or my rate of return that I expect may be different than what the typical rate is. And I might be seeking a property that offers a higher capitalization rate just so I feel certain about this investment. So let's say a property is selling for $1 million. I'd like to be able to generate, let's say, $100,000 per year in net operating income. That might be too much. I might not be able to find that specific property because the higher the capitalization rate that you require, the lower the price, the lower value of the house will be. So let's say you're looking at a property and you see a net operating income of $100,000 and your desired capitalization rate is 10% or 0.1. 100,000 divided by 0.1, in your mind, this should be selling for $1 million. Well, if the person that's selling it thinks that a capitalization rate of 5% is sufficient, well, then he's going to look at this and say, my property is generating 100,000 in net operating income. I divide that by 5% or 0.05. My property should be selling for $2 million. So based on that, you might have a slight difference there. And who's right? Well, it's normally based on what the other properties in that area are selling for and so on. But that's the general idea of capitalization rate. So first off, find, dependent on the area and dependent on what you desire, what's a right capitalization rate, and based on net operating income, afterwards you could start getting an idea of valuation. So capitalization rate is that rate of return on the property. The higher the capitalization, the higher percentage of that purchase price that you should generate in net operating income year after year after year. It's natural for that capitalization to be low in industries such as Vancouver, which are seen as stable and they don't really lower in value. But in areas where you would expect properties to value to go up or down and be more risky, you would expect a higher capitalization rate. So that just gives you a kind of a baseline idea here. You need to calculate the capitalization first with many properties and not just the one that you're interested in. And then you could use that rate and the net operating income to find the value. So I hope you guys found this video interesting. I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good day. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing or joining my class where I guide you to apply and expand on the information found in these videos to real-life examples. Have a good day.